They called the humans a contingency. We were told they were unstable, useful only when desperation outweighed risk. They arrived late, without ceremony, and no one from the Dominion forces volunteered to interact with them. I was assigned the task not by merit, but by lottery. Bad luck, I thought then. I know better now. The first time I saw them, they were huddled around a fire they shouldn't have started, laughing as if we weren't on a death world. Their armor was mismatched, scratched, customized with symbols that held no military logic. One had a skull painted on his chest plate. Another wore a child's toy on his shoulder, pink and grinning. It disgusted me. I filed a report citing violations of protocol. No one responded. They called me Starfish, despite knowing my name. I didn't understand the joke. I still don't. Every time I attempted to correct them, they laughed louder. One threw me a ration bar and winked. Eat up, Starfish. You'll need your energy. We march at dawn. No briefing. No tactical review. No updated satellite schematics. Just a time and a direction. I argued. They ignored me. And at dawn they moved, loud and chaotic. Our Alliance soldiers followed 10 minutes later, wary and confused. An hour in, we reached the Gloam Forest. The air shimmered with magnetic fog. I advised we halt and recalibrate. The human leader, a woman they all called Madcap, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "It's just weather. Keep moving." I thought they would die. That was the logic. No unit survives that terrain without scanner mapping. But they kept going. One by one, they walked straight into the shimmering mist like it was a sunrise. 2 hours passed. Then the screams began. Not from the humans, from our forward Varn scouts. We scrambled sensors, adjusted feeds, requested drone footage. All useless. Something was jamming the signals, mutating the transmissions into static and whispers. The fog thickened. I was preparing the retreat order when the shapes came running. Quadrupeds made of bone and chrome, howling with mouths that didn't close. They moved like rivers, merging and separating, fluid in form but not in purpose. They were coming for us. The Varn line held for 11 seconds. 11. I counted. We fired concentrated plasma rounds. It passed through the creatures like light through oil. The Grell gunners collapsed under psychic interference. Half the Jark died screaming about flames that weren't there. Then came the sound. Not the enemy. A different sound. Music. It was the humans. Out of the fog. They came sprinting, soaked in green fluid, covered in gore and soot, laughing like children chasing each other through fields. Their weapons were glowing red from heat discharge. They didn't fire in formation. They didn't fire at all. They threw grenades, knives, fists. They tore into the enemy like they had waited their whole lives for this one moment. One jumped on a bone beast and screamed, "Yeehaw!" as he rode it backward through a tree. Another shouted coordinates mid-combat to launch an airstrike with no approval chain. It worked. The explosion cleared 50 meters of forest. Madcap kicked open a crate, pulled out an illegal incendiary device, and handed it to me. Ever use a sunkisser, Starfish? I'm not cleared. You are now. She pulled the pin and hurled it with an underarm throw that would be laughed at in any Dominion Academy. It bounced off 3 trees and landed inside the mouth of one of the larger creatures. The light that followed turned the fog into a brief sunrise. The creature didn't scream. It imploded. No sound, just a perfect folding inward of impossible mass. In the aftermath, while Dominion medics counted losses and repaired what little equipment we had left, the humans set up camp. One whistled. Another took out a small, crumpled photo and pinned it to the hilt of his blade. No prayers, no rituals, just practical survival. One cooked meat that shouldn't have been edible. They offered me a piece. I refused. He ate mine and shrugged. I submitted another report. It detailed the humans' flagrant disregard for structure, their grotesque combat methods, and the psychological toll of witnessing their behavior. It was flagged pending review. It still is. The second day, I tried to follow their unit more closely. I wanted to understand their cohesion, how they communicated, what chain of command they observed. I found none. Orders came in the form of jokes. Movements were coordinated by shared instinct, not structure. They finished each other's tactics like they shared a mind. But I saw no implants, no hive link, just trust, experience, madness. We passed a ridge littered with corpses from another species, burnt, headless, arranged in spiral. A warning, the humans didn't stop. One of them spit on the ground and muttered, "Cowards." Another said, "This place sucks." That was the extent of their commentary. Later, I asked one of them why he wasn't afraid. He blinked at me. Afraid of what? Death. Pain. The things we're facing. "We already face them," he said, biting into a ration bar. "Back home. Different names. Same demons." I stared. He didn't elaborate. He walked away whistling something slow and sorrowful. That night, a creature crept into camp. It was silent, camouflaged, reading our heat signatures. It slit one of the Lorwyn guards before he could scream. I woke to find the humans had already killed it. One of them sat on its corpse, drinking tea. It twitched, he said, so I stabbed it again, just in case. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I watched them. I watched how they laid down on rocks like they were beds, how they turned trauma into humor, how they cleaned their weapons like they were sacred. And I began to understand. This wasn't recklessness. It wasn't luck. It wasn't madness. It was legacy. These were the descendants of fire and fury, evolved not for peace but for endurance. The other species, the Varn, the Grell, the Jark, we trained for combat. The humans were forged by it. I realized I was less a soldier than a courier in comparison. The next day, they walked through a minefield barefoot. Not metaphorically, barefoot. They said the magnetic charge wouldn't trigger the mines if skin conductivity was low enough. I asked how they knew. "We lost a guy last week finding out." One said, shrugging. Madcap saluted me with 2 fingers. "You coming, Starfish?" And I did. By the 3rd day, the enemy adapted. They started using proximity cloaks and auditory illusions. Our alliance forces couldn't counter them. Half the coalition's command structure was wiped in the night. But the humans didn't wait for new strategies. They adjusted on instinct. One soldier fashioned a motion detector from a broken communicator and a spoon. Another smeared ash under his eyes and said it helped him see movement better. I checked the science later. It didn't. He did it anyway. They didn't need logic to be effective. They needed experience, and they had centuries of it, across deserts, mountains, jungles, stars. Every world they stepped on became their proving ground. I watched as they formed a wedge formation without speaking. They didn't practice it. They just did it. We encountered a creature that mimicked the sound of a human child crying. Dominion forces froze, confused. A Jark officer approached to investigate and vanished. The sound grew louder. Then the humans opened fire, not on the sound but the space around it. They didn't aim where the noise came from. They aimed where it shouldn't have been. They understood misdirection not from training manuals, but because they invented misdirection. After the threat was neutralized, one of the humans said, "Who brings kids to a war zone?" And the others laughed like it was a comedy show. I asked how they knew it was fake. Madcap replied, "We know what real fear sounds like. That wasn't it." That night, I studied their gear. Scratched helmets, repurposed components, symbols scrawled in marker. One soldier had the word MOM etched into his chest plate. Another wore a necklace made from shell casings. These were not elite operatives. They were personal. Every piece of gear told a story, every mark a memory. I understood then they didn't go into battle with standard issue kits. They carried history. The 4th morning, a transmission came through, enemy stronghold located. Coalition forces hesitated, requesting heavy artillery and orbital support. The humans didn't wait. They loaded what gear they had and moved out. I argued with their sergeant. "You'll die," I told him. He looked me over, then pointed at the sky. "So what?" They marched before authorization. Our unit scrambled to follow. The stronghold was buried in a crater, surrounded by twisted metal and biowalls. Our scanners detected over 200 life forms inside. The humans didn't flinch. One of them smiled and said, "Just enough." What followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration. The humans didn't storm the entrance. They climbed the walls. They tunneled underneath. One used an exosuit's severed arm as a battering ram. Another planted explosives by taping them to a rat-like native creature and sending it through a vent. No orders, no approvals, just action. Ruthless, inventive, ugly action. The enemy fought back with every horror they had. Neurotoxins, illusions, scream fields. The Jark battalion fled before reaching the outer ring. Dominion units engaged for 10 minutes before pulling out. Only the humans kept going, dragging the fight into the gut of the fortress. I followed them, not by order, but by something else. I needed to see it. Inside, it was carnage. The air smelled of ozone and bile. The humans moved like they were home, clearing corners with brutal precision. One was burned across half his face and still barked jokes about vacationing on a lava world. Another took 3 rounds to the chest and didn't fall, just leaned against the wall, reloaded, and kept firing. They reached the control core, where the enemy commander waited, a telepathic being massive and ancient, feeding on fear. I could feel in my skull, trying to crush my thoughts. I dropped to one knee, bleeding from the ears. The humans didn't even blink. Madcap walked forward, rifle lowered. The commander pulsed with psychic energy. She raised her middle finger and said, "Try harder." The aliens screamed, and they opened fire. Not just bullets, flamethrowers, sonic disruptors, knives. When the rifle jammed, one human used a wrench. The commander tried to flee, phasing through the wall. A soldier tackled it mid-phase, stabbing it over and over until its form collapsed. When it was over, they didn't cheer. They didn't pose. They sat down. One lit a cigarette. Another collapsed and said, "Someone better have saved me a damn snack." I stood in silence, watching as they bandaged each other without a word. I felt something rise in my chest. Fear, respect, maybe both. These weren't heroes. They didn't want medals. They wanted survival. And they achieved it by doing what no other species dared, embracing the horror. Later, I asked Madcap why they fought like that. She looked at me, eyes tired but alive. "Because no one else will." I said, "You could have waited for backup." We were the backup. I couldn't argue. They had done the impossible. And they treated it like just another Tuesday. That night, as I updated my logs, I deleted my previous reports. They weren't wrong, but they weren't enough. The words I'd used, chaotic, brutal, undisciplined, missed the truth. The truth was this: humans don't fight like soldiers. They fight like survivors. Not because they're fearless, but because they've made fear a companion. And that's what makes them terrifying. The fortress wasn't the end. It was bait. The moment humans uploaded the enemy's core data, a silent signal triggered across the region. The ground cracked. The sky turned a shade of red we'd never cataloged. From the east, machines poured out, not constructs, not drones, but biomechanical titans grafted from the dead. They moved on 6 limbs, emitted no energy signature, and ignored our weapons like dust in a storm. Coalition forces broke immediately. Half the Grell battalion activated emergency evac. The Varn commanders argued over retreat logistics, even as the machines tore through their lines. No plan, no fallback position, no order. The humans didn't ask for either. They fell into place without direction. A perimeter was formed in seconds. Snipers climbed debris piles. Engineers rigged explosives to nearby wreckage. Medics stopped triaging the wounded. They grabbed rifles. I watched Madcap drag a Jark officer to cover, then slap him across the face. "You breathe, you fight, or you don't breathe at all." He obeyed. I tried to issue coordinates for an orbital strike. One of the humans pulled the communicator from my hand and tossed it aside. "Too slow," she said. "We don't need permission anymore." The machines came fast. Faster than anything that big should move. The first wave hit us like a meteor. Bodies flew. Metal screamed. The humans held the line with bullets, blades, and bare hands. One picked up a downed ally's flamethrower and shouted, "Time to light the grill," before diving into the mass. I've seen battle simulations. I've read campaign logs. I've studied 100 wars. None of them prepared me for what I saw that day. A human took a spike through the leg and used it to pin an enemy to the wall. Another one, missing an eye, kept feeding ammo into his partner's cannon until his own arm melted from heat exposure. And still he smiled. No retreat, no panic, just raw, concentrated defiance. The enemy adapted quickly. They learned our formations and moved a flank. The humans adapted faster. They changed position mid-assault, rotated squads like shifting gears. It wasn't drilled, it was instinctive. I realized they weren't reacting to the battlefield. They were the battlefield. Every motion shaped the next. One of the Mets released a sonic burst that scrambled nervous systems. Dominion troops collapsed in convulsions, but the humans had already countered it. They shoved cloth in their ears, triggered internal comm filters, or just bit down and powered through. One of them laughed, bleeding from his nose, and yelled, "That all you got?" And then came the third stage. A new signal hit the sky, pulsing rhythmic, like a heartbeat from something ancient. The machines halted mid-charge. For a moment, everything stood still. Then they changed, folded inward, split into shards of themselves. And from those shards came something worse. Humanoid creatures, wrapped in armor made from fallen species, using weapons we hadn't seen in any known war. They looked like us. They mimicked us. That broke the others. The Grell scattered. The Laroans detonated suicide packs. Even the Varn retreated into bunkers, locking doors from inside. Only the humans stood between those things in total collapse. Madcap rallied her people. No speech. No anthem. Just a nod. They responded by tightening their grips and lowering their visors. They moved forward. Not to hold the line. To break it. I followed. I don't know why. Maybe because no other direction made sense anymore. The fight that followed defied logic. Weapons became useless. Tactics collapsed. The enemy mirrored every move, countered every formation. But the humans, they didn't fight fair. They didn't fight clean. They bit, scratched, improvised, broke rules that didn't exist. I watched a human use a flare gun to blind an enemy mid-tackle, then detonate a fuel cell by stabbing it with a knife wrapped in power wire. It worked. It shouldn't have, but it did. Madcap fought like she was already dead. She took a blow to the chest that would have shattered reinforced bone, spit blood, and kept going. Her squad followed. No orders needed. I was thrown to the ground. Weapon lost. One of the mimics stood over me. It wore Varn armor, my armor. Its face shifted between mine and Madcap's, mocking, taunting. Then a shadow slammed into it from the side. One of the humans, silent, furious. They wrestled across the ground, grunting, snarling. No tactics, just survival. Finally, the mimic was pinned. The human drove a sharpened pipe through its throat. After, he pulled me up without a word. I looked around. Smoke, fire, screams. And still, the humans fought. A few minutes later, they activated their final card, something called Extinction Mode. I heard them whisper it through comms. A last resort protocol, only deployed when all odds were lost. No documentation, no signatures, just a switch flipped in their minds. They split into pairs. One partner fought. The other followed with a backpack full of detonators, virus injectors, neural disruptors. Every enemy contact was a trap. If a human fell, the pack went off. If they lived, it still went off. A moving wall of destruction. We didn't authorize it. They didn't ask. In 15 minutes, the tide shifted. The mimic units couldn't adapt fast enough. They began to retreat, recalibrate, malfunction. The humans pushed harder. By the time our air support arrived, an hour too late, there was nothing left to bomb. Just burning steel, scattered limbs, and humans sitting in the wreckage, drinking warm water and patching wounds. I counted 19 survivors from the original 62. Every other species had sustained 70% losses or more, but the humans didn't brag. They didn't gloat. Madcap leaned against a broken mech, coughing blood, and looked at me. That's why we don't wait for orders, Starfish. I had no words. She glanced at the sky, squinting at the dropships descending, telling to bring snacks, and whiskey, and a new set of lungs. Then she passed out, and I finally understood these weren't warriors. They were weapons forged in skin, not sent to win wars, but to end them when all else failed. And they had done it without fear, without recognition, without mercy. That's what extinction mode means. It means them, unleashed. The battlefield was silent for the first time in days. Fires crackled among the ruins, smoke curling into the sky like ghosts refusing to leave. The machines were gone. The mimics were ash. What remained were the humans, bloodied and broken, but standing, always standing. Madcap was carried aboard the medevac with 3 shattered ribs, a punctured lung, and a dislocated shoulder. She grinned at the medic and asked if the cafeteria still served pudding. The medic didn't answer. I did. I told her I'd find her some. She gave me a thumbs up before passing out again. The coalition arrived late and loud. Dominion officers barked orders, demanded logs, tried to assign credit. The humans ignored them. They had no time for politics. They were too busy dragging the wounded, cataloging the dead, and salvaging what they could. There were no celebrations. No medals were issued. No speeches made. I filed my final report that night. It was short. They won. I wanted to say more, but no words were adequate. No sentence could capture what I had seen. The humans had done more than survive. They'd transformed slaughter into endurance, into victory, into something I still don't have the courage to name. Back at Dominion headquarters, the incident was buried beneath bureaucracy. The humans were listed as auxiliary response teams. No mention of their tactics. No notes on extinction mode. Just a footnote in a war that should have ended us all. I gave a testimony to the council. They listened with cold disinterest. When asked, "Why do you sound afraid of them?" I said, "Because I am." That ended the meeting. Years passed. I left the military, unable to serve under leaders who refused to learn. I became a historian, not the kind that writes for accolades, but for memory. I began cataloging everything I could find about human operations. Most files were restricted, redacted, lost, but the whispers remained. There were stories, always stories, of humans dropped into suicide zones and returning with maps, of entire moons reclaimed with just 12 soldiers, of civilizations that tried to enslave them and vanished from the galactic map. One day, I received a parcel. No sender, no tracking. Inside was a data chip. It contained a single audio log, damaged, partial, but real. Madcap's voice crackled through the static. "If you're hearing this, we held the gate. We didn't blink. That's all." I played it 27 times. Each time, I heard something new, not in her words, but in her silence, in the way she paused before saying "we," like she was thinking of every name, every face, every loss, and still proud. I visited the war site on the anniversary. There's no memorial, no plaque, just a blackened ground where fire met fury. A few fragments of armor still lay buried in the dust. One had the word "home" scratched into it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I dreamed of humans charging into the fog, laughing. I dreamed of their songs, their rage, their silence after battle. I dreamed of standing beside them, terrified and small, as they fought monsters I couldn't even look at directly, not because they loved violence, but because they accepted it, because they knew someone had to, because they were built not to dominate, but to outlast. I used to think the Dominion was eternal, that our civilization had ascended beyond primal instincts, that we were leaders by logic, by order, by structure. I was wrong. We are alive because they were there when we needed them. But that isn't what haunts me. What haunts me is what would happen if the stars ever turned against them. What happens when humanity stops holding back? What happens when the galaxy forgets the price of their patience? What happens when they decide peace is no longer worth the silence? I saw it once. I saw a glimpse of what they become when pushed too far, when diplomacy dies and only resolve remains. There's no word in any of our languages for what they are in those moments. Not monsters, not heroes, something older, Something worse. Something we should thank the void never turned its eyes fully upon us. So when someone asks me what I saw that day, why I left, why I write, why I can't sleep, I don't tell them about the blood or the weapons or even the victory. I tell them I fought beside humans once, and I'm still trying to feel worthy of surviving it.